Wait, it's inside.
Inside Outer Cape. Inside Outer Cape.
Inside Outer Cape.
Provincetown Realty with Nate and Laura.
Okay.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone to our very first episode of Inside Outer Cape, Provincetown Realty with Nate and Laura. I'm Laura Potenza, and this is Nate Butera. So, why don't you go first?
Well, this is something we've talked about doing for a long time.
Yes, and actually, most of our real estate conversations have already looked like this.
It's like coffee and sitting down
and talking through things.
Yeah.
Yes, and usually saying, "Oh, this is so beat down." Yes.
So we thought we'll turn the camera on and invite you into the conversation.
So this is not meant to be flashy or overproduced. It's just meant to feel like you're sitting with us having a conversation.
And as I said, my name is Nathan Butera. I've lived in Provincetown for over 20 years. I've been practicing real estate for almost 10, and I've seen the market shift in ways that surprise even me now.
Mm-hmm. And my name is Laura Potenza, and I am a wash ashore from New York City, moved to the Outer Cape about 9 years ago, and have been doing real estate a little under 5 years. And
that's actually the difference that matters. We wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it really does. I came into the business during a time when buyers were overwhelmed and confused, and asking very direct questions.
And after 20 years, it's easy to forget which things aren't obvious to somebody new in the market.
Mm-hmm. So our conversations naturally started balancing experience with new perspective.
It's worth mentioning that we didn't meet through real estate at all.
No, we did not. We actually met during doing a play here at the Provincetown Theater,
which is also very Provincetown.
Very, very Provincetown. We were cast together in a play, and we spent a lot of time together rehearsing, talking, walking around, talking during our breaks. And we got to know each other as people before anything else. So
it was an intense play. It was called The Humans.
It was called The Humans. It was a very, very intense play. Probably one of the hardest plays I've ever actually done.
Certainly. And yeah. I do not have the breadth of experience that Laura Potenza has with acting, and you've actually had a career as an actor in New York City, but it was a really intense play. So that just meant that we worked very closely and tightly together. So we really got to know each other pretty well.
Yes.
But the conversation turned to real estate. In fact, I was busy in the middle while we were rehearsing. I had some really stressful transactions.
I remember that. I remember a lot of times on our breaks, we'd be having a snack or whatever, and Nathan would be on his laptop, looking very, very serious and concentrated.
Yeah.
So, and that's actually how we kind of got talking about real estate was, what are you doing?
And I remember thinking that you're asking the right questions.
Well, yeah. And you said to me that I would be good at this.
And you didn't believe me.
No, I didn't. But it did stay with me. And eventually I listened and got my real estate license. And when I started, actually, you became my mentor.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not an easy place to learn.
No,
this. Yeah.
No, it's nuanced. Every property has a very specific story, and every buyer comes in with expectations that sometimes don't always match reality. So yeah.
And I remember thinking, I didn't know how connected that you were to Provincetown when we met.
Yes, no, I was.
And I just caught bits here and there that you had several different jobs and you were I had a sense that you kind of didn't have a direction in here, which in P-Town, which isn't entirely true. We can talk about that later, but
Yes.
Laura actually has a pretty strong connection to Provincetown, but you had just moved here full time from New York City.
Yes, and finding work. You had asked me, I'm curious what you do for work. And I remember my answer was, oh, I have 3 jobs like everybody else
Right.
in town. So, and that's kind of another way that we got talking about the business.
Yeah, because I remember, over my 20 years of being here, having several different kinds of jobs. And it wasn't until I started doing real estate that it all started to click for me.
Right.
And so I thought, let me save you a little time. You don't need to do all these other jobs. I think you'd be really good at this. And here's why. Because she came to real estate requires 2 different kinds of minds. It requires an analytical, sort of organized mind. I would say, what do you call the left brain mind? And you also really need the right brain because you need to understand how people work. And as an actor, when you're reading scripts, you are constantly looking for motivation, not just for the character you're playing, but for the other characters.
For the other people around you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're always talking to the other actors about motivation and about sort of how to perform a scene in a way that feels true and honest. And my practice of real estate was one of authenticity, and it still is. And I got a sense also from you that you were about authenticity.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I knew that Laura would come prepared with her script, her lines memorized before anybody else. I want to say, and this is probably not true, I want to say that she had like colored tabs in her script and stuff like that. I probably inventing that.
No, I actually did.
No, you did. So
yeah.
So I'm like, she'd be the perfect person to do this. She gets both sides. She has both brains.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was saying.
Right. So yeah. And when I started working here at Gibson Sotheby's International Realty with Nathan as my partner, I felt like I was in a very safe place to ask questions. Because no transaction is the same here. And every transaction, there's some new piece to it that you've never experienced before. And being able to ask those questions without feeling like silly or foolish was so helpful for me. So, yeah.
And what helped me was being able to see the market through your client's eyes. And because you were newer, I was able, then the questions you were asking was able to help me understand that I know more than the clients do. So sometimes I can talk real estate and they're like eyes glaze over. So
yes. Yeah.
And when I was working with Laura in the beginning, it was like, oh, these are things that if you're not in the business, you don't necessarily understand. And so it helped me to see that sort of every transaction should be, I should come at it with the same some of the same ideas that you and I started working when we started working together. And when I would kind of explain things, I realized, oh yeah, the clients, even though they're smart people, they don't necessarily know all of these things.
Right. Because it's impossible to know everything, and then eventually over time, it just sort of stopped. Well, yeah, it's kind of evolved from mentor-mentoree
into like a real collaboration.
Right. So, and then we realized we were having these conversations over and over again.
Pricing, timing, rentals, historic homes, condos.
Right. And even if Provincetown or the Outer Cape is the right move or the right place for somebody.
So this channel is about slowing the conversations down.
About being honest and not selling
and sharing what we've learned.
Yes.
From two different vantage points.
Right. Right. So if you're curious about Provincetown real estate or just love this place, we're really glad you're here.
And we'll be sharing conversations like this regularly.
So just grab a coffee, join us.
We'll see you at the table.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.